People vanish without a trace, spirits speak in full sentences, and sometimes the scariest part isn't what you see, it's what you can't explain. Here are 5 of the most chilling real-life paranormal cases that still defy logic and will absolutely keep you up at night. The David Lang disappearance, a man who walked into thin air. One moment he was waving to a neighbor, the next he was simply gone. In 1880 on September 23rd, on a farm near Gallatin, Tennessee, David Lang was walking through his field in full view of his wife, children, and a visiting judge. Now the weather was clear, no trees nearby, no structures to, obstruct the view. He was mid-step and then simply just disappeared into thin air. His wife screamed, the children ran, the judge stood stunned. I mean, they all saw it. 2 men, even on a buggy nearby, also witnessed this happen and ran over to the spot where he disappeared. Now, the initial thought from everyone was that he just simply fell into a hole, which, yeah, that was my initial thought also. Now, search teams combed the field for weeks. They dug trenches, they brought in dogs, not a single footprint beyond where he'd been last seen. No hole, no sinkhole, nothing, like no signs of struggle. The only thing left behind was silence and confusion. But then things got really weird. Months later, the grass where Lang vanished began to discolor in a perfect circle. It turned yellow, brittle, and wouldn't grow. Animals refused to step into it. Horses would shy away. Even birds avoided flying overhead. A year after his disappearance, his daughter stood in the spot where he disappeared and said she thought he heard him say something. His children actually claimed they could hear faint cries in David's voice echoing from the empty space where he vanished. It was as if he was trapped somewhere else, like caught in a place between places. Now, some researchers have connected the incident to theories of dimensional, rifts, spontaneous teleportation, or even time slips. Now, Charles Fort, the grandfather of paranormal research, cited it in his writings on unexplained disappearances. Skeptics tried to debunk it, but the reports and witness statements remain eerily consistent. Huska Castle, the fortress built to seal hell. You've heard of castles being built to keep enemies out, but this one, it was actually built to keep something in. Huska Castle, also known as the portal to hell, tucked into the dense Czech forest north of Prague, was constructed in the 13th century over a yawning black hole in the earth. Locals said it was bottomless, that demonic creatures crawled out of it, that people who got too close were dragged inside. So what did the king do? Well, he built a castle, not to live in, not for war, but as a lid, a seal, a trap to stop whatever was trying to escape from the depths below. No water source, no fortifications, no kitchen, no strategic value, literally just a chapel built directly on top of the hole. So get this, when the hole was first discovered, prisoners were offered pardons if they agreed to be lowered inside the hole. So they threw prisoners into the pit, again, offering them pardons if and only if they survived. I mean, obviously that makes sense, right? Well, most didn't. The ones who did survive came out screaming, aged overnight, faces twisted in fear, rambling about clawed beasts and shrieking voices. I mean, the first volunteer was said to have only lasted literally seconds before screaming to be pulled back out. And yeah, once they pulled him out, it's alleged that he was aged beyond recognition. Hair turned completely white. He was rambling about creatures with bat-like wings crawling up the walls. And what's creepier is that the castle's chapel is built directly, literally over that hole, almost like it's a seal. I mean, the windows there are all fake. They're just kind of painted to look like windows. Fast forward to World War II, the bad guys took over the castle, drawn by its occult reputation. They sealed off entire rooms, performed rituals, and reportedly used the site for brutal human experiments. To this day, no records exist of what they were doing, but locals say the screaming started again. Visitors do report sudden blackouts, disembodied growling. Paranormal teams say cameras fall, audio gets corrupted, and investigators have been scratched and gagged by unseen hands. I mean, this place is literally open to visitors today. Like, one of you, please go. Let us know how you make out. The Bell Witch, the spirit that spoke and hurt people. Now, this is America's greatest ghost story. Imagine a ghost so powerful it spoke in full sentences. So violent, it slapped and tormented a family and even confessed to execution. The Bell Witch haunting of the early 1800s is still one of the most terrifying and well-documented poltergeist cases in American history. It all started in a small cabin in Adams, Tennessee. John Bell and his family began experiencing hearing knocks on the walls, strange voices whispering in the night, and chains dragging across the floors. Now, at first they thought it was an animal, right? And then the voices started to speak. The entity, soon known as the Bell Witch, called out names, it recited sermons, it mocked the family's prayers. It had intelligence, like personality, and a really brutal sense of humor, but it saved its worst torment for the Bell's daughter, Betsy. She was slapped, scratched, and even lifted by her hair. I mean, her body showed marks and her screams echoed into the woods. Words got out, of course, and then Andrew Jackson, a general at the time, and later the 7th US president actually, decided to see for himself. I mean, his wagon froze on the road, the horses wouldn't move, then a voice from nowhere said, "Let him come through, I've been waiting." Like, okay, ghosty, like, say less, but also what? Like, that night, Jackson's men were attacked by invisible forces. I mean, one of them had his firearm torn from his hands and thrown across the room. By morning, Jackson was gone. He later reportedly said, "I would rather fight the entire British army than spend another night with the Bell Witch." I mean, that's extreme. I just feel like that's so dramatic. But anyway, years later, John Bell was found passed away in his bed. A small vial of black liquid was discovered in the cupboard. No one knew what it was. When a drop was given to a cat, the cat passed away instantly. I mean, the witch claimed she had poisoned him. So the Bell Witch didn't fade away. The cave near the old Bell Farm is actually still active, and investigators report seeing orbs, hearing laughter, and actually being physically touched by something they can't see. The Pollock twins, a haunting case of reincarnation. Now, 2 girls pass away, okay? 1 year later, their parents give birth to twins who seem to remember their sister's life in perfect details. Joanna and Jacqueline Pollock were unalived in a very tragic car accident in 1957 in Hexham, England. Now, their parents were shattered, of course, but in 1958, Florence and John Pollock welcomed twin girls again, Jennifer and Jillian. That's when things got really weird. From an early age, the twins began to talk about their passed on sisters. They asked for toys that belonged to Joanna and Jacqueline without actually being told the toys even existed. They remembered the names of classmates and locations in a town they never visited. Jillian once pointed at a school and said, "That's where I used to go." Jennifer had birthmarks identical to Jacqueline's scars. At 4 years old, the twins passed the crash site and started screaming. They clung to each other, crying. I mean, the car, it's coming to get us. Their parents were stunned. They hadn't spoken about the accident. They haven't even told them about their sisters, period. They had moved towns to avoid the trauma altogether. No one had told the girls anything. Even creepier, Jennifer would speak in Jacqueline's tone and handwriting. The girls would act out scenes from their sisters' lives, but by the age of 5, the memories began to fade slowly, as if the connection was slipping away. Now, Dr. Ian Stevenson, a really respected psychiatrist who studied over 2,000 reincarnation cases, investigated the twins in person. He concluded it was one of the most compelling cases he had ever seen. I mean, the twins had no psychiatric conditions, there was no coaching, and their knowledge could not be explained. I mean, the story remains one of the strongest pieces of reincarnation evidence to date. The Dyatlov Pass incident, a mystery buried in ice. 9 very seasoned hikers went into the Russian mountains. Now, what was found weeks later still haunts the world today. In 1959, a group of experienced Soviet hikers led by Igor Dyatlov trekked into the snowy wilderness of the mountains. Now, their goal was to reach Mount Odorin. But something went horribly wrong. When rescue teams finally found their campsite, the hikers' tent had been slashed open from the inside. Now, footprints led away barefoot in the snow into like sub-zero temperatures. Their bodies were scattered across the landscape, some frozen in poses of terror. But it wasn't just hypothermia. One hiker had a crushed skull, 2 had shattered ribs, injuries equivalent to a car crash, but no external wounds. One woman's tongue and eyes were missing. Their clothes contained strange burns and tested positive for radiation. I mean, even stranger, they had orange skin, white hair, and some of the hikers' watches had all stopped. But get this, at the exact same time. For decades, theories have ranged from, infrasound induced panic to secret Soviet weapons testing to avalanche cover-ups to alien abduction. But the Russian government's official ruling, well, a compelling natural force. No further explanation? Sure, Jan. But no natural force explains crushed bones without bruises or or radiation on clothing, or why seasoned hikers would rip open their own tent in a blizzard and flee barefoot into the night. I mean, this one is the most studied and disturbing mysteries of the 20th century, and to this day, no one really knows what happened. The Waverly Hills Sanatorium. Now, Waverly Hills Sanatorium, located in Louisville, Kentucky, was open to house the growing number of tuberculosis patients. Due to a lack of medical knowledge at the time, patients were kept outside year-round for fresh air, and many had their lungs surgically removed. It is known as one of the most haunted places on Earth, with countless reports of paranormal activity. One person actually shared their experience working there and said, "I worked in the sanatorium for a while, and a lot of residents always, claim to hallucinate either small dogs or, either eating ice cream before they pass away. It's always facility specific too. This place I worked at, I've had about 6 or 7 residents claim to see a little girl eating ice cream and then they pass on later that night. That seems too coincidental for me, right? The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, now home to the WV Lobotomy Project, the psychiatric hospital was originally built for 250 patients, but the population rose to over 2,000. Conditions were atrocious, and many patients, suffered. Since closing its doors, maintenance staff have reported ghosts as well as other paranormal sightings. Numerous stories and reports of ghostly phenomena have been associated with the asylum. Some of the more prominent stories include a little girl named Lily who is said to roam the halls, a man named Jesse who allegedly passed away in a bathtub there, and other accounts of strange occurrences and apparitions. Now, one person who worked there shared their story on Reddit. They said, "One evening while training for the job, I was on the first floor with a couple coworkers while everyone else was touring upstairs. We were just kind of, wasting time, quietly observing the area. Light from outside was coming in through the windows, casting on the inner hall's wall. In that light, I watched the perfect silhouette of a man from head to hip walk through that light from left to right." She continued to say, in the wee hours of another night, we figured it would be cool to see what would happen if we shut all the doors of the ward. One of the doors, as I was closing it, the knob twisted in on my hand. This person actually shared several different stories of her times there and all of the paranormal stuff that actually went down. And a lot of the comment section was people just sharing their own stories of times that they took a tour there. It's still actually available for tours, so if this has piqued your interest, go book a visit if you dare. Utica State Hospital, New York's first state-run psychiatric facility built in 1843, was characterized by its grandiose revival architecture, but it was not as glamorous as it looked. It is known for the invention of the Utica crib, which is a cage-like bed that was used to restrain patients. Now, those who have explored the facility since its closing have reported hearing screams and seeing faces in the windows. People who have explored the facility both during its active years and after its closure have reported experiencing just other unsettling phenomena as well, that is basically unexplainable. One visitor said they went and heard nothing but weeping and sobbing, which is a common thing apparently. Most people have heard this as well. Now, most have said this place just feels like lingering spirits, and have felt kind of hands brush against them. Most people said they were skeptics before visiting Utica, but now they are full-blown believers. The Danvers State Hospital, built on the same grounds where the Salem witch trials occurred, Danvers State Hospital possesses a very rich history of paranormal lore. It was originally intended to treat the mentally ill with respect and compassion, but this facility quickly became overcrowded and conditions deteriorated. It is said that Arkham Asylum from Batman was based on this institution. Now, the hospital's history of mistreatment, neglect, and trauma is believed to have left a very lasting impact on the land. Even in passing, the patients were not treated with dignity, with many headstones only having numbers instead of names. Now, the immense suffering of the patients is thought to have lingered, contributing to the ghostly activity there. Visitors report a variety of paranormal experiences like screaming, banging, and crying, apparitions and disembodied voices, particularly in the cemeteries there. Now, deep black shadows and grayish mists there also. Many people have said just an overall sensation of being watched or followed. The 2 cemeteries on the property are considered hotspots for paranormal activity, with apparitions and voices just being the most common reports there. Alton Mental Health Center. Now, the Alton Mental Health Center in Illinois is the only facility on this list still in operation today. Once home to cold water treatment, electroshock therapy, and lobotomies, this hospital is notorious for its mistreatment of patients. Like many other hospitals of the time, time, the hospital was also a working farm. It was believed that the work and responsibility was necessary in the treatment of mental health crises. Now, Alton State Hospital became well known for its gorgeous grounds. Patients were allowed to care for the cattle and other animals and plants, which included a well-stocked fish pond, apple orchard, and even tobacco crops. Now, one patient even grew peanuts, which they then sold in Upper Alton. Now, in 1918, the hospital recognized the need for an attached cemetery for those who passed away and were unknown or unclaimed. Later, though, the hospital was even used to house, shell-shocked soldiers coming home from the horrors of World War I. Alton State Hospital earned a reputation, though, for mistreating patients, subjecting them to crude treatments that sometimes lasted hours or even days. Considered cutting-edge treatment at the time would be labeled as torment today. Now, in modern times, many people, have reported paranormal interactions, including 2 nurses who heard a voice whispering to them in the same spot. Staff and visitors report hearing unusual sounds, disembodied voices, slamming doors, and nurses on duty reported hearing a quiet voice that asked them, "Who is that?" Others report the sensation of just being touched, and one photo even showed a bright orb with a vision of a man's face in agony. So while the facility, is still operational today, ghost investigators who managed to visit are told by spirits to get out, promptly being pushed out of the room. Rolling Hills Asylum, located in upstate New York, Rolling Hills Asylum was originally known as the Genesee County Poor Farm. Established in 1827, the Genesee County Poorhouse, originally a working farm, soon became a refuge for some of society's less fortunate. Widows and orphans mingled with the mentally ill, and the unclaimed passed on were buried on the property. With over 1,700 documented demises and hundreds not recorded, it's no wonder, Haunted North America rated it as the second most haunted site in the United States. Throughout its history, it's operated as an orphanage, infirmary, sanatorium, and a nursing home. Now, thousands of unmarked bodies are buried here, and the facility has been featured on many TV shows. Today, it is part of the Haunted History Trail of New York State. One person did share their experience visiting on Reddit and said, "My fiance took me on a 6-hour unguided ghost hunt for my birthday at Rolling Hills Asylum. These photos were taken right when we began our investigation at 8:41 p.m. They have timestamps. I was walking down the first floor hallway past the infamous ramps. Out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw someone peek their head out of a room. I checked in the room assuming it was probably someone else exploring. I was alone. I stopped and snapped some pictures after I reviewed the photos later on in the night and realized I had caught a shadow in the doorway. I saw someone poking their head out. Ooh, that gave me chills." Eloise Psychiatric Hospital. Like Rolling Hills, Eloise Psychiatric Hospital was originally a poorhouse located in Wayne County, Michigan. It grew, to become a massive complex with over 50 buildings. It housed a variety of patients, including those with mental illnesses and chronic medical conditions. The hospital was known for its often very brutal and inhumane treatments, including lobotomies, hydrotherapy, and other methods that are now considered unethical. Ghost stories have plagued its reputation, and human remains have been found in jars on the premises. Widely accepted by locals to be haunted, it was sold to basically create a new housing complex in 2018. Many people, including those who have worked at or investigated the property, have reported experiencing paranormal, experiences such as seeing ghosts, hearing whispers, witnessing objects moving on their own. So, the Eloise Asylum has been transformed now into a haunted attraction, offering tours and escape room experiences that, leverage the building's reputation for paranormal activity. The asylum is currently actually being considered for a $4 million renovation, with plans to convert it into a haunted hotel, which further emphasizes this reputation as a haunted location. The Royal Hope Hospital. Last on my list is the Royal Hope Hospital. This hospital was a Spanish military hospital in St. Augustine, Florida, in use from 1784 to 1821. One of the oldest hospitals in Florida, the Royal Hope Hospital has been an integral part of Florida's history since its original building was constructed, all the way back in the late 1700s. St. Augustine is the oldest city in Florida, so it's no surprise that Royal Hope calls, Old City home. Now, the original building was demolished and a replica was later constructed, at which point it was discovered to be built upon a Native American burial ground. Now, there have been many sightings, of ghosts and reports of objects moving on their own. The surgeon's office is actually said to be the most haunted. This room is home to a spirit who likes to grab onto visitors' clothes and refuses to let them go. His grasp is described as basically freezing cold, hard, and forceful. One visitor stated that she could actually feel a large hand gripping her clothing, refusing to let her go. The only way to shake it off was to run out of the room as quickly as possible. Luckily, the clingy spirit didn't follow her out. Horton Mine in Nevada. Now imagine being 900 feet below ground, surrounded by rocks so black it swallows your flashlight's beam, water dripping from the ceiling, and rusted chains swinging gently as if pushed by invisible hands. This is Horton Mine in Nevada, long abandoned, with tunnels originally built to transport ore from the Victorian mine. Now, the explorer venturing into these tunnels first noticed the water-slicked walls reflecting his faint light. Every step echoed, magnifying the slightest sound, then a chain above him swayed. He froze. There was no wind, no visible cause, only the creaking metal. Moments later, a low whisper rolled through the tunnel saying, "Go now." His heart racing, he spun around only to find the tunnel completely empty. Horton Mine is notoriously dangerous. Many parts of the floor are unstable. Sudden drops are hidden by darkness. Experts say abandoned mines can amplify sounds due to their narrow construction. But multiple explorers repeat hearing clear human-like voices where no one is present. One group even recorded faint clanging as though an old conveyor system had mysteriously sprung to life. What makes Horton Mine terrifying isn't just the dark, unstable tunnels, it's the history. Miners lived and passed away here, often in grueling conditions, and some never left the shafts alive. Could their spirits remain? I mean, witnesses swear the answer is yes. The combination of visual, isolation, eerie acoustics, and the weight of history create a very truly chilling experience. Clearwell Caves in England. Now, the Clearwell Caves in Gloucestershire, England aren't just picturesque old mines, they're steeped in ghost stories. Miners worked these tunnels for centuries, extracting iron ore, and locals say some never left in spirit. One famous account comes from a 1970s film crew. Although no footage exists, many accounts from the crew remain the same. Legend has it that while filming underground, a sudden figure appeared, a miner in old suit-stained clothes, pointing them to a hidden tunnel that offered a safe route. When they turned to thank him, he had vanished. Locals call him the Old Man. The claim has been, he's been seen guiding lost visitors ever since. Now, visitors often report metal clanging, footsteps where no one is visible, and lights flickering inexplicably. Now, the reddish iron ore casts a red light glow, making shadows appear alive. The tunnels are narrow, kind of labyrinth-like, and many haven't actually been used for decades, which amplifies even the slightest noise into a terrifying echo. Explorers also recount sudden cold spots, like a human presence kind of brushing past them and objects slightly moved from their original position. It's a mind that feels alive yet invisible. Perhaps it's the cumulative memory of, centuries of toil, loss, and demise embedded in the walls. I personally would not want to explore this one, but let me know if you would. The Argonaut Mine in California. Now, Argonaut Mine in Jackson, California is infamous for its 1922 disaster, when a fire trapped 47 miners more than 4,600 feet underground. Today, it's actually considered one of the most haunted sites in the American West. Paranormal teams report recording faint whispers and knocks during exploration. Some claim to have captured voices pleading for help, impossibly distant, yet clear enough to send chills down your spine. The tunnels remain mostly sealed and dangerous, but adventurous explorers risk entry for just a glimpse of the eerie silence. The mine's history is honestly pretty brutal. The 1922 fire was devastating. Miners were trapped, some passing away completely alone, cut off from help. The trauma from that disaster seems to linger all the time later. Now, many visitors say that, descending into Argonaut feels like stepping into a temporal echo. The past is present, but intangible, a whisper kind of in the dark. Now, some investigators claim that unexplained shadows and temperature drops are commonplace and happen quite frequently. Cameras pick up anomalies in the air like streaks of light or figures in peripheral vision that vanish when looked at directly. The combination of historical tragedy, claustrophobic shafts, and documented EVP activity makes Argonaut Mine a prime example of a haunted abandoned mine, and one, again, that I'll never step foot in. Nova Scotia's coal mine in Cape Breton. Now, the abandoned coal mines of Cape Breton, Nova Scotia are some of the most unnerving underground locations in North America. In the early 1900s, coal was mined here under grueling conditions. The mines eventually closed, leaving behind deserted tunnels, timbers, and machinery, but also legends of lingering miners. Paranormal investigators exploring the mines report hearing pickaxes striking coal where no one is actually present. Shadowy figures are seen fleetingly in the distance, only to vanish, of course, when approached, and the darkness is absolute. Water drips from ceilings, echoing down corridors, and old timbers groan under the weight of years. These mines were not only dangerous for those who worked there, they were isolating and stifling. I mean, the combination of physical danger and psychological stress created an environment where fear could linger long after the mines were closed. Modern explorers feel that same tension as they descend into the coal-filled tunnels. Lights flickering, senses heightened, hearts pounding. It's really not a place you want to visit. it if you're easily triggered with anxiety. Phoenix Gold Mine in Idaho Springs, Colorado. Now, deep in the Colorado Rockies, the Phoenix Gold Mine sits carved into the side of Trail Creek Canyon, just outside the old mining town of Idaho Springs. Now, once booming during the Colorado Gold Rush of the 1880s, this mine eventually shut down, leaving behind tunnels, rusted carts, and a history steeped in tragedy. But you know what makes it infamous today isn't its gold, it's the spirits said to still roam its dark veins. Locals say the Phoenix Mine has never really gone quiet. Even after the drills stopped, strange sounds continued echoing through the tunnels. When the site reopened as an actual tour location, guides began reporting eerie encounters like cold spots that appeared suddenly. The most chilling reports come from paranormal investigators who've actually spent the night inside. Cameras have captured orbs moving deliberately like they're kind of following someone. One investigator claims her flashlight turned off on command after a voice told her to leave. Another caught an EVP of a woman humming, eerily clear in the glory hole section of the mine. Now, an area where miners once actually passed away in a collapse over a century ago. What makes the Phoenix Gold Mine especially unnerving is that it's partially open to the public still. That means ordinary visitors, families, tourists, even skeptics have come out shaken, by what they've seen. Some report feeling sudden nausea or lightheadedness just before hearing a whisper or seeing a shadow. Now, the mine's tragic past feeds, the haunting. During its early years, several miners passed away from cave-ins and gas exposure. Legends say a miner named Tom, crushed by falling rocks, still haunts the entrance, calling out to warn others. Now, investigators from multiple ghost hunting shows have actually filmed inside the Phoenix Mine. During one session, equipment recorded spikes in electromagnetic energy just as a voice said, "Still here." In another, a motion sensor went off repeatedly even though the tunnel was empty. After researching these mines, one theme is crystal clear to me. Abandoned mines hold more than rock and rust. Darkness, isolation, water, metal, and the trauma of, demise create environments where the boundary between natural and supernatural blurs. Exploring these mines is more than a physical challenge, it's a psychological journey. When cameras venture where humans rarely go, they capture not just shadows and sound, but a lingering, almost tangible sense of fear.
We all know that demonic spirits like to communicate through Ouija boards, but did you know that they've also figured out how to text to get their message across? Back in 2014, Father Marian Rachel from Yaroslav, Poland, claimed to have received several digital missives from the Prince of Darkness after performing a failed exorcism on a high school-aged girl. The Austrian Times reported that the girl's soul remained possessed by a demon, so it's pretty legit. According to the holy man, the author of these texts is an evil spirit who has possessed her soul, adding, often the owners of mobile phones are not even aware that they are being used like this. However, in this case, it is clear. He referred local news reporters to one of Satan's texts that read, "She will not come out of hell. She's mine. Anyone who prays for her will die." After the father replied, Beelzebub took his turn and said, "Shut up, preacher. You cannot save yourself, idiot, you pathetic old preacher." According to the priest, clearly this young girl has been possessed and needs further help. It's not known whether the beasts also use WhatsApp, Facebook, Messenger, or Twitter. Seriously though, if God works in mysterious ways, demons work in really, really lazy ones. I guess work smarter, not harder, but I hope my texts don't get hacked. Does anyone else know about Canada's first ever case of possession? This is an event that dates back to the 1600s. Leading figures in Quebec City during the 1660s, to be specific, suspected an alleged witch, Danielle Voyle, of employing diabolical arts to induce a demon to possess Barbe Halai, a young girl working at a manor house in nearby Beauport. Both the witch and the family of the girl had recently arrived in Quebec at the time, and the tiny village had fewer than 800 people. And when strange things started to happen to the family, people were a little thrown off. How strange, you might ask? People recorded details about them that we don't have for other people in what was known as New France. The French colonists treated this particular case of demon possession in the ways familiar to them from their country of origin. They appear to have assumed the demon itself matched the demons of Catholic tradition. Now, this poor girl continued to experience the symptoms of demonic possession for months after the alleged witch was executed, apparently on the orders of Bishop François de Laval. Sadly, the court details of the crime and sentencing have been lost, but we can assume. Historians have noted that the end of the ordeal came in the form of an exorcism, or what sounds very much like one, conducted by a layperson using a rib bone believed to belong to the deceased Jean de Brébeuf. Saint Jean de Brébeuf was a French missionary who was captured and killed in 1649, by the way. To quote the history texts, we have a laywoman who would normally not be permitted to perform an exorcism, in fact performing an exorcism in all but name. Experts consider this an example of the cultural compromises that the frightened colonists felt they had to make. These colonists were pretty few in number, and were cut off from France for most of the year, and were kind of in trouble. They needed support from a king, who might turn his attention away from them at any moment, towards folks that were just generating more income. And also, they needed help from indigenous allies, who they didn't always respect. Not good to offend those that you need help from. If you're looking for the records, experts have quoted sources including the memoir of a local aristocrat, the personal correspondence of a nun living in the town's convent, the biography of another nun who spent a year attempting nightly exorcisms, and the daily records of nearby priests. These accounts shed light on how town authorities attempted to deal with this affliction, which included horrifying visions, violent outbursts, all usual demon stuff if you ask me. Has anyone ever heard of the International Association of Exorcists? So it's an organization that was founded in 1990 by 6 priests, including the world-famous exorcist of Rome, Father Gabriel Amorth, and Father Jeremy Davies. Its statutes were approved by the Roman Catholic Church on June 13th of 2014, and this organization provides training and support to exorcists and also helps to raise awareness of the issue of demonic possession. It has around 250 members from 30 countries, and all those members are priests who have been authorized by their bishops to perform exorcisms. The organization is composed of mostly Catholic priests, but there are a couple of Anglicans and Orthodox folks, so made a little bit of variety. The association recently published a Mexican Catholic priest's report of a significant increase in the extraordinary action of the devil. Devotees who seek miracles have been victims of numerous cases of oppression, obsession, and demonic possession, according to the Reverend Andres Lopez, who is a member of the College of Exorcists of the Primacil Archdiocese of Mexico. He described the skeletal Santa Muerte, also known as Holy Death, or the Angel of Death, as a growing cult or sect that is a fusion of Brazilian Quimbanda, Cuban Santeria, and occult Satanism. He's also associated it with organized crimes such as robberies and narco selling. So overall, just a bad time for folks who live in that area. Okay, here's a doozy of a case. In summer of 2013, 25-year-old John Jenkins from Cumbria, England, expressed fears that he would kill his mother. While in his deranged state, he approached a random van driver, put his hands in the air in a surrender motion and cried out, "I am armed, but it's not in my hands." Desperate to avoid committing such an atrocity, he tried to end his life by downing a cocktail of whiskey, painkillers, LSD, and attempting to end himself in a river. He was discovered later that day, unstable, and smeared with his own red fluids after self-inflicting. After these events, he was admitted to a psychiatric hospital where the staff was like, "Yeah, you're low risk." And they're like, "Get out of here, pal." I'm no expert, but I'd hate to see high risk if that's considered minimal. Later that evening, he confessed to a group of friends that he was possessed by demons, saying, "I'm the devil, I need to confess." He said his mother had become aggressive and controlling after the events of that day, and that same night his sister Katie had confided to one of her own friends that she was pretty worried about her brother, saying, "It doesn't look like him, doesn't seem like him, something's off." The next morning, after a brutal argument with his mother and sister, this guy went downstairs and hit his mother with lots of blows to her head with the sharp end of an axe, and when his sister came downstairs, he attacked her as well to stop her from screaming. Guess the sister was sadly right to be worried. After the killings, Jenkins was found stark nude, crouched behind a bench, acting erratically. Well, more erratically. When a police officer asked him if he had taken anything, he was like, "Lives." A court has sentenced him to a minimum of only 12 years in prison, which doesn't feel like enough. Alrighty, we're ending today with a personal favorite tale that I think needs to be talked about more, the case of the Black Lace Veil. Now, while I obviously love the idea of a cute gothy aesthetic, this is anything but. After one of his public lectures, Ed Warren, the man we all know to love or hate, was conversing with a couple that had been in the audience, where a boy introduced himself as Alan and explained that he'd brought his girlfriend Lonnie to the lecture because he suspected that she'd been overtaken by some sort of occult influence. He explained that when his girlfriend became angry, her features would change into something resembling a wolf, and then the voice of a different person would speak from inside of her. Now, when Ed's wife Lorraine walked over to the group, Lonnie experienced an episode of instantaneous possession and lurched out in an attempt to attack Lorraine. This incident terrified everybody in the vicinity, with the Warrens ending the audience chat session immediately, and Ed was like, "Okay, let's get you folks out of here so we can deal with this privately." And Lorraine stayed outside because she's like, "I'm gonna take a minute. In the backstage room, the girl was fully under possession, breathing heavily, and her facial features had transformed into the wolf-like appearance the boy had talked about. After about 10 minutes, the possession passed, and Lonnie was lucid enough to explain dealing with memory loss, along with losing hours and days of her life over the last couple of months, which is a symptom common in possession. She went on to share her background, that she was a girl wealthy enough to buy whatever she wanted, but money can't buy love. Originally, her now boyfriend Alan had refused all of her advances and bribery attempts at becoming hers, so she resorted to visiting a store prominent in selling books to help with witchcraft, and bought a book on black arts. And she performed a ritual to get a lover. This ritual involved, you guessed it, the black lace veil, on top of which she placed a crown of goat horns before renouncing God in her baptism, along with swearing allegiance to Satan, and finalizing the ritual by washing down the vow with a cup of animal life source. Simple stuff you can get at the grocery store. About a month after Lonnie performed the ritual, Alan began paying her the attention she craved, making her little world perfect. But what she hadn't counted on was that she was in debt to the demonic. She gave them permission to enter her life. Ed knew right away, crap, Lonnie's gonna have to undergo an exorcism, so he made contact with a priest the next morning who was able to come and assist. Upon arrival, the priest just wanted to make sure, so he instructed Lonnie to close her eyes and slowly count to 20, while his assistant stood behind her and placed a cross behind her head. The entity possessing the girl suddenly went wild, screaming, "Take it away, it burns, take it away," like she was freaking out. During the entire exorcism, kept screaming, she's mine, her soul is mine." The spirit was eventually separated from Lonnie, but just before it departed, it vowed it would return to another. The Warrens gathered up everything, the veil, the conjuring book, all the paraphernalia, and brought it home. But I'm not done yet. Video's not over here. Later on, as time goes on, Ed receives a phone call from a man named John Rand, who's like, "Hey, can you meet my daughter? She has a natural knowledge of what he took to be witchcraft," and he was a little concerned. When she stared at people, even when they weren't aware of it, she'd fill their mind with inhuman terror. John called Ed because, well, Charlene was manifesting different personalities, some male, some female, some that could even be called human, but all making extremely threatening statements to John and his wife. He had already brought Charlene to various doctors, clergymen, and they were all like, "Talk to Ed. Ed can fix your problems." So Ed's like, "Okay, come on over, let's see what we can do." So when he met Charlene, he went to go shake her hand, and she backed away and stared distrustfully at him, keeping track of every move he made. His attempts to question her resulted in no-end answers, and her eyes began to wander about the room in boredom. When they landed on the black veil in the corner, Charlene jumped up, grabbed it, and clutched it to her chest. Her features immediately began to transform into those of a wild, sneering creature, distinct from this otherwise pretty girl. Ed drew 2 vials of water to himself, one unblessed, the other blessed by an exorcist, and moved away from what was no longer Charlene, but an inhuman spirit, a lesser devil of hell. Horrid moaning and various animal sounds came from the girl as Ed blessed her, banishing the demon away for now a second time. Yeah, those items have been locked up ever since, and I don't ever want to see them back in this world.
The Exorcism of Anneliese Michel. Now imagine the sound of someone growing in 6 different voices, all coming from the same young woman. That's exactly what priests and witnesses reported hearing during the exorcisms of Anneliese Michel, which is one of the most disturbing cases the Catholic Church has ever tried to silence. Anneliese was a bright, deeply religious 23-year-old student from Germany. Now she wasn't just any girl, she was kind, devout, and dreamed of becoming a teacher, but her life spiraled into something unimaginable after she began suffering from seizures at the age of 16. Doctors diagnosed her with temporal lobe epilepsy, which is a condition that can cause hallucinations. But as the years went on, her family and even her doctors started to notice things that just couldn't be explained by medicine. Now, Anneliese began hearing voices that told her she was damned, and she claimed to see demonic faces everywhere she looked. Crosses made her recoil in pain. She couldn't even enter a church. She screamed when holy water touched her skin, and her parents described seeing her contort her body in impossible ways and bark like an animal for hours. When priests were called in, they claimed she spoke fluent Latin, a language she had never studied, and identified herself as 6 different entities: Lucifer, Judas, Iscariot, Nero, Cain, a really bad guy who I can't talk about, and a disgraced priest named Fleischmann. Now, over 10 months, 2 priests performed 67 separate exorcisms, some lasting up to 4 hours as Anneliese's body kind of withered away to less than 70 pounds. By the time she passed away in 1976, her knees were shattered from kneeling in prayer for so long. Her last words were heartbreaking. She whispered to her mother, "Mother, I'm afraid." Now, the church quietly buried the case, but tapes of her exorcisms with guttural growls, snarling laughter, and overlapping demonic voices leaked years later, terrifying anyone who heard them. The church still refuses to acknowledge her possession, labeling it a medical failure. But many priests who actually saw her firsthand swore there was something far darker than epilepsy inside her. The Exorcism of Roland Doe. Now, this is the true 2, Exorcist. Now, if you've ever seen The Exorcist, you know how terrifying that film is. But what if I told you the real story behind it is even worse, and the church has kept most of it hidden? Well, in 1949, a 14-year-old boy known under the pseudonym Roland Doe, sometimes Robbie, began experiencing very bizarre, violent phenomena in Maryland. It started small scratching noises inside his bedroom walls, objects flying, off shelves, and his mattress began shaking violently at night. Then, very strange words began appearing on his skin, scratches that seemed to be written from the inside out. His family, desperate for answers, first sought help, from their Lutheran pastor, who quickly realized this was beyond his power. He turned to the Catholic Church. Multiple priests reported that Roland's behavior would shift instantly. One moment he was calm and polite, the next his eyes would roll back. His voice deepened beyond recognition, and his body would convulse with superhuman strength. During one exorcism, witnesses claimed the boy broke free from his restraints, ripped a spring from the bed, and slashed a priest's arm from shoulder to wrist. On another occasion, the word hello appeared carved into his stomach. It wasn't written by anyone in the room, it just formed itself as priests looked on, in horror. The boy's family was relocated multiple times to, continue this ritual, eventually ending up at a Jesuit hospital in St. Louis. Over a month of nightly exorcisms, priests recorded that Roland levitated, spoke in Latin, and growled in voices that didn't belong to him. The final exorcism ended with him screaming the words, "Satan, I am Saint Michael. You will leave this boy now." Then, according to witnesses, a loud kind of sound echoed through the room. Roland fell back onto the bed unconscious, and when he woke up, he whispered, "It's over." So the Catholic Church sealed the official records, but priests later admitted that several exorcists involved refused to speak of what they saw ever again, and the boy's real identity, still protected today, remains, one of the most guarded secrets in modern exorcism history. The Smurl haunting. If you think demons only attach to people, think again. The Smurl family learned that evil can actually infest an entire home. Now, in the quiet suburb of West Pittston, Pennsylvania, Jack and Janet Smurl moved into what they thought was their dream house in the late 1970s, but within weeks, things turned nightmarish. The smell of rotting flesh would fill the air, walls kind of with brown ooze, and an unseen force slammed their dog into a wall so hard it left a dent. At night, the family reported hearing growls, footsteps, and whispering voices calling their names. Now, the demon targeted everyone differently. It actually essayed Janet while she slept, apparently. It hurled Jack across the room in front of witnesses. Their daughters were terrorized by shadowy figures that hovered over their beds. And when the family called the church, priests initially dismissed them until famed demonologist Ed and Lorraine Warren got involved. Lorraine later claimed she saw a dark human-shaped mass crawl up the wall and vanish into the ceiling. The Warrens described the entity as, inhuman. Not a ghost, but a demon feeding on the family's suffering. Multiple exorcisms were performed, each one making the activity worse. Neighbors reported hearing screams and moans coming from the house when no one was actually inside. The Smurls even moved, but the demons followed them. It wasn't until the late 1980s that the church performed a final secret exorcism. Afterward, the attack stopped abruptly. The church publicly denied involvement, but the Warrens claimed the Vatican sent priests under orders of complete confidentiality. To this day, the Smurl haunting remains one of the most chilling and controversial possession cases the church refuses to comment on. The Enfield poltergeist. Now, few cases in history have more witnesses, photos, and evidence, and yet the church still won't touch it. In 1977, single mother Peggy Hodgson and her 4 children began to experience a series of escalating paranormal events in their modest council house in Enfield, London. It began when Peggy's daughters heard knocking on the walls of their shared bedroom. Furniture slid across the floor on its own, toys flew through the air, and 11-year-old Janet was the center of it all. She began actually levitating in front of witnesses. British police officers, journalists, and psychic researchers all saw very unexplainable things firsthand. Janet would speak in a voice that was clearly not her own, deep, a male kind of voice, claiming to be the spirit of a man named Bill Wilkins. Now, he had passed away in the house years before that, but soon the activity grew a lot darker. Janet was seen being thrown from her bed by invisible hands, twisted in midair, and dragged across the room. Investigators reported extreme temperature drops and even bite marks that appeared out of nowhere. The local priest refused to continue visiting after one encounter left him violently ill. The church worried about public backlash and accusations of hysteria, so they declined to perform an exorcism. Instead, it actually distanced itself from the family. But recordings from the investigation, over 200 hours worth, still exist. They actually contained Janet's horrifying possession voice and the sound of furniture moving when no one was actually near it. Skeptics still debate whether the Enfield poltergeist was real or staged, but when dozens of independent witnesses, police, reporters, and neighbors, they all describe the same impossible things, it's very hard to call it fake at that point. The possession of David Glatzel and the devil made me do it case. Now, this story is one of the few cases where demonic possession became a legal defense in court, and the church wanted nothing to do with it. In 1980, 11-year-old David Glatzel began seeing a mysterious shadowy figure with hooves and glowing eyes. He said it threatened to steal his soul. Within days, he was having violent fits, growling, and speaking in voices that weren't his. The family called Ed and Lorraine Warren, who said they found clear signs of demonic possession. Now, over several days, they assisted priests in performing multiple exorcisms. During one of them, a witness claimed they saw a black mist rise from David's body and move towards his sister's boyfriend, Arne Cheyenne Johnson. Arne allegedly shouted, "Take me instead." Weeks later, Arne began acting strangely, moody, distant, aggressive, and on February 16th, 1981, he brutally hurt his landlord to unaliving him, claiming he didn't remember doing it. Now, during the trial, his defense attorney argued that, Arne had been possessed when he committed this crime. It became known worldwide as the devil made me do it case. Now, the church distanced itself completely, refusing to confirm or deny its role in David's exorcism, but witnesses, including the Warrens and multiple family members, insisted they saw supernatural forces at work. Arne served just 5 years in prison for far less, that was far less expected, and later he actually said he believed something truly evil had taken over him. The Vatican never commented on the case, and the original exorcism tapes have never been released. The Smurl family haunting. Now imagine being yanked awake in the middle of the night, not by a sound, but by the hand that isn't actually there. Fingers digging into your arm, leaving bruises that seem to burn into your skin. That was the reality of Jack and Janet Smurl in Pennsylvania during the 1980s, when their quiet family home transformed into a stage for one of the most disturbing possession cases ever reported. The Smurls moved into their duplex in 1974, hoping for a fresh start. At first, the disturbances were very subtle. Tools vanished from Jack's workbench, a strange odor, something like rotting garbage mixed with sulfur filled the air, but vanished as quickly as it came. Now soon, scratching noises began echoing through the walls at night. At first, they dismissed it as just plumbing, or maybe rodents even, but then the attacks escalated. The family reported that their German Shepherd was thrown against the wall by an invisible force. Loud guttural growls came from empty rooms. Most chilling of all, Jack himself claimed he was actually attacked in his bed. Scratches and bruises appeared across his body overnight. Janet described being basically by unseen hands while she was basically prayed. Now, the Warrens, the famous paranormal investigators, were brought in after multiple failed attempts at cleansing the house. Ed Warren reported seeing a black, shapeless mass that moved with intelligence, shifting through the walls and flickering out of sight. Lorraine Warren, a self-described clairvoyant, said the house was infested with a powerful demonic presence. Even the Catholic Church became involved, but 2 separate exorcisms failed. Neighbors reported hearing screams echoing through the home when no one was inside. Visitors were attacked, scratched, and shoved. The Smurls eventually abandoned the property, but their torment followed them. The family's case became so notorious, it inspired books, interviews, and eventually even a Hollywood retelling. The scariest part? Well, many locals still believe the house carries a curse long after the family moved away. The Enfield poltergeist. Now, what would you do if your 11-year-old daughter floated off her bed in the dead of night? For Peggy Hodgson, a single mother of 4 in Enfield, London, this wasn't a question. It was her life. Now, in August 1977, Peggy heard her daughter screaming. When she entered their bedroom, she froze. Furniture was sliding across the floor without anyone touching it. A heavy chest of drawers moved towards the door as if trying to trap the children inside. Peggy rushed forward, pushed with all her strength, but said it was like fighting against another person. What began as knocking and scraping soon turned into full-scale terror. Toys flew through the air, chairs slid across the room. Janet, only 11 years old, was repeatedly hurled from her bed as if tossed by invisible hands. Neighbors, police officers, and eventually reporters witnessed it firsthand. One officer actually signed an affidavit stating she had seen a chair move across the floor by itself. Even more disturbing were the voices. Investigators captured recordings of Janet speaking in a very deep, gravely voice that sounded like a grown man. I mean, the voice identified itself as Bill, a man who claimed he had passed away in the house years before. The Hodgsons insisted their daughter could not fake such, guttural tones, especially for hours at a time. Now, skeptics argued the children may have faked parts of the haunting, and indeed, Janet later admitted to exaggerating some events, but many moments had dozens of credible witnesses. The case attracted worldwide attention, becoming one of the most famous possessions and poltergeist incidents ever recorded. Whether it was a hoax or horror, the Enfield case remains chilling because of how much it was documented. Photographs showed Janet literally mid-air, apparently levitating. Audio recordings of the demonic voices still exist to this day. I mean, this wasn't just whispers in the dark, this was a possession broadcast to the world. The Exorcism of Roland Doe. Now, in the late 1940s, a teenage boy in Maryland became the unwilling inspiration for one of the most terrifying movies of all time, known as Roland Doe. Now, his story would later inspire The Exorcist. But the reality behind the film is even darker. It began with scratching noises in the walls, then objects moving on their own. Now, Roland's family was deeply religious, and when his aunt introduced him to a Ouija board, things spiraled. After her sudden passing, Roland began displaying very violent mood swings. His bed shook violently as if someone was trying to throw him out of it. Scratches appeared on his chest, forming words like hell and evil. Now, priests were called, of course, and what they documented remains disturbing. Roland would snarl in voices that wasn't his own. He threw priests across the room with very unnatural strength. During one session, he actually tore a bed spring from his mattress and used it to slash a priest's arm wide open. Multiple exorcisms were attempted over several months. Witnesses reported the boy screaming Latin phrases that he had never learned. When holy water touched his skin, blistering welts appeared. I mean, the final ritual ended when Roland suddenly kind of cried out that Satan was gone. Afterward, the boy lived a normal life and rarely spoke of what happened. What makes this story so haunting, though, is that dozens of written records exist from priests and witnesses. This wasn't just folklore, it was a case taken seriously by the Catholic Church. Whether Roland was possessed or suffering psychological trauma, something deeply disturbing definitely happened in that home. The Tanacu exorcism. Now, in 2005, a young Romanian nun named Irina Cornisi began hearing voices. Now, fellow nuns claimed she was possessed, while others later argued she suffered from schizophrenia. But instead of receiving, medical treatment, she was subjected to a ritual that shocked the world. At the Tanacu monastery, Father Daniel Corgonaut believed he was battling demons. He and 4 other nuns bound Irina to a wooden cross, gagged her with a towel, and left her without food or water for days while praying over her. Witnesses claim she screamed, begged for release, and then fell unnaturally silent. By the time she was untied, Irina was passed away. The official autopsy blamed adrenaline injections and neglect, but locals whispered that she had indeed been possessed and that the exorcism either freed her or unalived her. Now, the case drew worldwide outrage, of course. Father Daniel was sentenced actually to 7 years in prison. The monastery was shut down completely, yet villagers continued to defend him, insisting that, he had actually tried to save Irina from demonic forces. To this day, many Romanians remain very divided. I mean, was she a victim of just mental illness that got no treatment? Was she a victim of religious extremism? Or was she a victim of a genuine possession gone horribly wrong? The Tanacu exorcism is terrifying because it honestly does blur the line between faith and fear, and it leaves us with a very chilling reminder. What humans do in the name of God is just as terrifying as any demon. The Ammon's haunting in the demon house. Now, in 2011, a small house on Carolina Street in Gary, Indiana, became the center of one of the most chilling possession cases of modern times. Latoya Ammons and her 3 children moved in. And honestly, from the start, the house seemed completely wrong. I mean, in the dead of winter, black flies swarmed the porch, which is weird. Doors creaked open on their own. Very heavy footsteps echoed from the basement when no one was even there. I mean, then the children began acting acting very strange. One son spoke in a voice that wasn't his own, his eyes literally rolling back until only the white part of his eyes were visible. Another child was reported to have levitated during a sleepover, which was witnessed by friends who fled in terror, of course. Social workers and police officers later claimed to actually see very disturbing phenomena themselves. I mean, a medical professional even reported seeing one of the boys walk backwards up a wall in the hospital. I mean, flipping over his grandmother before landing back on his feet. Nurses screamed and they fled the room, rightfully so. I mean, the case was investigated by local authorities, documented in hundreds of official pages of police reports and medical notes. Eventually, the family just fled. I mean, unable to endure the torment any longer, which is fair. The house itself became infamous, nicknamed the Demon House. Paranormal investigator Zach Bagans later purchased the property and he filmed a documentary inside and then had it demolished, claiming it was too dangerous to remain standing. The case is horrifying because of how many professionals, cops, doctors, social workers put their names on the record, swearing they had seen things science just simply could not explain. To this day, the Demon House remains one of the most compelling modern possession cases ever reported.
Now let's start off today with this haunted home in North Wales. Pennyford Farm has seen so many cases of paranormal phenomena over the years that it even attracted the interest of Hollywood. Mother of four, Rosemary Gower, whose experiences at the farm were investigated for a BBC documentary titled Paranormal: The Girl, the Ghost, and the Gravestone, has spent years documenting the over 300 various occurrences that have taken place there. Now this ranges from disembodied voices in empty rooms to full-on apparitions. In one case, a large wooden owl was seen moving on its own, while in another, the figure of a pregnant woman mysteriously appeared on the patio before vanishing into thin air. Rosemary documented what she believed to be the unexplained experiences, and was so spooked that she got a psychologist into her home to do a study, and he found no rational explanation. She mentioned that one day she was moving some dried flowers that had started to look a bit, not the greatest, so she wanted to dispose of them. She took them from the lounge to the kitchen, put them on the counter. Granted, because they were passing away, they were dropping petals everywhere. Now somebody came to the door, so she disappeared for about 30 seconds, and by the time she returned, every single petal had disappeared. They had been replaced by dead or dying half-drowned wasps. Now, there was no sign of a wasp nest anywhere on the property, and all of the doors and windows were shut. Try to explain that. The documentary claims that all the spookiness started when the family found a Welsh word written on an inside wall of their empty home after they returned home from a New Year's Eve party at their daughter's house. The family said it read Tagnifed, which is Welsh for peace in a religious context. I apologize if I butchered the pronunciation. The family claims that this started a flurry of Welsh words appearing, like Hir am Aros, which means long suffering, and Erlidial, which means persecutions. Now, of course, I mentioned earlier Hollywood was like, ooh, let's make a movie. But when the mom heard that it wasn't going to be factual, because movies like to emphasize things, she was like, absolutely not. She's like, they're going to make up a load of stuff based on a true story and it's going to be ridiculous. I wasn't going to sanction that. You either have a true story or don't have it at all. Which leads me to believe this story. The family thinks the catalyst, though, for all of this was moving the gravestone of a young girl that had been propped up at the front of their home. Well, pardon the side eye coming from me, it's an automatic response at this point. If people move stuff, that's going to cause chaos in the home. So what happened first? So I guess this all happened before the words. The family's eldest daughter, Nicolette, said that one night she awoke and saw a figure standing over the cot in the corner where her young spawn was sleeping. She couldn't see its face. It had like a hood, kind of like a habit a monk would wear. She bolted up and it was just gone. It creeped the life out of her, and rightfully so. See, I wish the Warrens were still around to investigate this house, because since the Gowers have left, the activity has cooled down some, but I just know in my bones that it's going to start again someday. Worse than ever. Next up, we have a ghost woman in a well. So back in September of last year, police officers and fire rescue crews attended the scene of a woman who was trapped down a well in Saltillo's Nuevo Centro Metropolitano neighborhood at around 3:30 in the morning. Before I go any further with this, the time is already telling me plenty about what I need to know about this, since 3 a.m. tends to be a very popular hour for ghosties, demons, men, hell, who only knows what else can cause havoc. So to confirm that this woman was alright, officers called down to the well to ask her what her name was. Juanita, she repeatedly called back from the depths. So it took some time, but the rescue team was eventually able to obtain the necessary equipment to lower a firefighter down to the bottom of the well to reach the woman. Granted, to their shock and surprise, when they got there was no woman. They checked everywhere, but there was no sign of anyone ever having been in that well. I don't know if they went as far as like DNA testing and scraping stuff off the walls, but I wish they would just for closure. Now this bizarre case has since prompted a number of paranormal interpretations, with one local investigator suggesting that what the rescue team heard was the voice of a ghost. Juanita, whoever she was, might have perished in the past by falling down the well. Well, whatever the case was, all that can be said for sure was that she's definitely not down there now. Look, I know I'm gonna sound like a broken record today, whether we all like it or not, but I know Ed and Lorraine would have been there with a priest to investigate had this happened while they were still with us. Tell me I'm wrong. In the middle of the pack today, we've got a mysterious white lady ghost, and if you know anything about Ed Warren, you know he would have been there faster than you can say Annabelle. Now, little context on Ed if you didn't know. He was obsessed with the white lady of Union Cemetery over in Connecticut, which is kind of where he lived. A lot of locals thought she was the ghost of Harriet Seeley, whose young son passed shortly after she was born, and then Harriet passed soon afterwards. Legend believes she might have died in hope of finding her son, and still wanders their final resting place looking for him, which is really sad. Now, other folks believe the white lady is the ghost of a woman from the 1940s who, took the life of her husband and later herself and is doomed to wander the graveyard. I'm not saying any story is better than the other, but that sounds a little less depressing. Her physical description is the one thing that remains consistent though. She's a young woman wearing a white dress with dark hair. Don't look at me, I don't wear white. It seems as if she enjoys scaring the daylights out of the living, which I like. Many who have witnessed her believe they have almost hit her with their vehicle, only to find no trace of her once they pull over. Whereas others claim they have often seen her hovering slightly above the ground around the cemetery, going back and forth amongst different gravestones. Ed once captured the elusive lady on tape, and then he hoarded that tape like it held the secrets to the universe, or like he was the US government with all the proof they have of alien life. He only allowed a couple of people to watch it while it was being held in his personal archives, and none were allowed to further analyze it on their own time. Pardon me, I know, time to get back on topic. I have ADD, can you tell? This particular case stood out to me because I am also a big fan of mysterious ghosty ladies, but that's just common knowledge at this point. So back in May of last year, a woman who had been out walking in the Cleethorpes Beach, England area spotted what appeared to be a mysterious figure dressed all in white. The witness, who wished to remain anonymous, had been out for a stroll along the promenade on May 11th. She spotted something strange out on the sands amidst the heavy fog. Now she wanted to capture it on camera, so she pulled out her phone, as one does, and snapped some pictures. She said that she spotted this strange looking white figure floating around on the beach, and she was absolutely stunned, so she took some pictures and ran back to her car. And just how gloomy and foggy the night being so gloomy and foggy just kind of made it even stranger. Now apparently this area is no stranger to paranormal stories, with several local landmarks being said to have their own resident ghosties, including the ghost of an old man who was killed in a ghost train accident. Even though he's not super threatening, whenever you see this man, he's gonna vanish into thin air. Some workers and visitors to the site have heard their name being called, but there's nobody around. Local legend, if we're gonna be specific, says that someone once took their life on the ghost train that once stood on the site, so it's speculated that the entity was connected. If you know more, let me know. It was kind of hard to find specific details on that man. Okay, maybe it's time to move on from ghosties to something unexplainable but a little less haunting. How about a body that didn't decompose after 4 years? Yeah, 4 years. So this story came out of Missouri, where this exhumed body of a nun was found to be perfectly intact despite having been buried, I know I'm gonna sound like a broken record, 4 years before. The remarkable discovery reportedly occurred when the Benedictine Sisters of Mary, Queen of the Apostles, which is located in the small town of Gower, set about moving the remains of its foundress, Sister Wilhelmina Lancaster, into the monastery's chapel. Initially intended to be a celebration of the woman who formed the order in 1995, the transfer took what some are calling a miraculous turn when they realized that, rather than having been reduced to bones, her body was inexplicably intact, recalling the stunning moment when they discovered the condition of the remains. Current Abbess Mother Cecilia marveled and said, "I thought I saw a completely full intact foot," and said, I didn't just see that. However, upon further inspection, she was right, which led to the sisters bursting into tears when they heard the news. They were all the more astounded when they learned that the puzzling preservation extended to her entire body, as well as a variety of items in the casket, like her crown and bouquet of flowers were dried in place, the professional candle with the ribbon, her crucifix and rosary were all intact, and even more remarkable was the complete preservation of her holy habit, made from natural fibers. The synthetic veil was perfectly intact, while the lining of the coffin, made of similar material, was completely deteriorated and gone. Adding yet another astonishing aspect to the story is that Lancaster's body was not embalmed, and her casket actually sported a sizable crack in its center, which allowed condensation to seep into the coffin, and presumably should have sped up the decomp process. This is wild. So the sisters were understandably uncertain as to how to proceed after making the discovery, with one of them saying, you can't Google what do you do with an incorrupt body. No, but file that under stuff I have Googled while I've been existing on this corner of the interwebs, and it's up there with the stuff I only say to the powers that be. I wish I could call up Lorraine Warren and ask her how this would be possible, but alas, no can do. And finally, what better way to end today than with another ghosty story that's coming out of South Yorkshire. So British paranormal investigators Lindsay and Lee Steer had been filming an introduction to their visit to the Huskar Pit near Stilkstone in South Yorkshire when they caught something strange on camera. Now, the site itself is known for a devastating 1838 mining disaster that resulted in the deaths of 26 young people who had been working in the mine when a flood left them trapped and unable to escape. I grew up in a mining town. Mining accidents are awful. They don't happen often, but when they do, they're not great. So in the clip, as the camera pans out, it's possible to see what appears to be a ghostly apparition standing a short distance away in front of a tree in the background. Now, Lindsay said it looks like a young girl is standing there, and she's got a little white dress and a little face, mouth and two eyes, and it looks like she's elevated off the ground and she's got bare feet. Well, what do you see? Let me know in the comments.